The automotive industry is set for a revolution that will disrupt and reshape global business, threatening the survival of every organization. To make sure you survive and win in the new automotive game, automotive growth expert Roberto Dal Corso has interviewed global experts from the automotive industry to identify the changes and the impacts that are coming to keep you ahead of the curve.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the leading disruptive automotive trends from around the world. This afternoon we have a very special guest and good friend. We have Douglas Floyd from Momentum Management and Research. Douglas, welcome.
Thank you very much, Robbie. It's great to be here.
No, it's great to have you on. Thank you for making time. I know you're busy. I do appreciate it. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. No, and just to get started and to kind of warm up a little bit, I'll go easy on you and ask a couple of easy questions. I mean, we've worked together a couple of years back. You helped me put together my marketing intelligence internally, and we met and you helped me tremendously, and I always came across and found you as an extremely professional and highly knowledgeable person about the automotive market. Could you help us and explain a little bit of what got you into the automotive industry?
Well, actually, it's kind of interesting. I mean, first of all, I live in Germany, so it's kind of a natural fit. It's a very important industry. But actually, in the past, I've been in the high-tech industry, and which I'll maybe touch on later as well, because the two seem to be converging.
Yeah.
And also, I was involved in the services business, both in Europe and in the US. So I kind of got into this automotive business with Momentum, because Momentum was trying to become more well-known. It's a very niche type of organization, but outside of the Nordic countries, it was kind of an unknown, and people were kind of desperate for the kind of information that Momentum had. But if you don't know about it, then you don't even know. If you don't know what you don't know, then you won't know what to ask for. And it was a little bit like that, not just in the US for sure, but even in other parts of Europe. So it was necessary to kind of just let people know who we were and just get acquainted with each other. And I mean, it was the same with you, I think. And we just try to go step by step. We're not really big on the hyping and, we're the best and we're the biggest or whatever. We're actually not the biggest, but we're very focused on what we do, and I kind of like that. That very don't try to cover the earth, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we focus on a very specific area, but provide useful information. And I think the other thing that's important in the automotive industry is to be in kind of a partnership. Your customers, because it's a very dynamic environment, and they can, you talked about market intelligence, things can change in an instant, and everything can be fine and nice and stable until it's not stable, and then all of a sudden the phone is ringing, and of course it might be one customer specific situation or maybe many, but I think the idea of being able to respond really to kind of just clear the air rather than have people in kind of a panic situation. I think that's something that I really enjoy about the work, because it's not something that's just totally predictable and sort of on a steady state mode. And specifically the truck business, which is, as you know, a much less stable business compared to let's say the car business. So I like that too, because sometimes life gets a little boring if everything's predictable for the next 3 years.
It's true, and I mean, I don't think that the automotive industry is anything but boring at this moment in time, because the way I see it, we're standing on the verge or going down the biggest revolution that the automotive industry has seen, which is totally changing day by day.
Yes, and that is exciting as well for both us at Momentum and for our customers. However, the impact on the truck business, especially the long-haul trucking business, is different. It is technology-driven, but it's different from the impact on the car business.
Yes.
Specifically in the area of electrification. So, but I think that makes it even more interesting, because people know that there will be changes. I mean, not just emission standards, but a whole raft of other issues coming along, which we can talk about later. But it's something where efficiency and productivity are very critical, just like in a factory. I mean, transportation is a service. So there's really a lot of great opportunities, which we're really excited about to work with our customers and to watch them become more successful.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear. And I mean, Douglas, what has driven your success over the years?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask my customers, but I think it's more of a personal approach, and every customer is different. They're not just human beings, but every organization is different. Every organization has its own culture and its own style of working and its own priorities. And I've worked nearly half my career in the U.S. and the rest of my career in Europe, in Switzerland and Germany. And in Europe, I think it's around 40 countries I've been working in, and now we're getting going with some preliminary research in Asia, with the trucking business there. So I think everywhere it's the same. You need to have an open mind and try to avoid, on the one hand, watch the data and don't just be overwhelmed by grand pronouncements from supposed experts, but rather, look for transparency and see that there's a solid foundation. But at the same time, be very open-minded to new ideas and new approaches.
Yeah.
I have to say that one of the keys to success is learning from your customers. They can tell you really a lot about what they need and so forth. This past year, for example, the growing importance of Turkey and Russia as markets for the trucks.
Yeah.
That was something that we had mentioned from time to time in passing, but they'd been kind of lumped in with the others. And then all of a sudden our customers were saying, actually we need to know more about Turkey and Russia. Well, okay. To us it was obvious because we've been doing it for years. But at the same time, it isn't necessarily obvious because those two countries contributed greatly to the growth of the overall market. Even though they're not a huge percentage of the market, they can drive up the numbers. And then people get confused about the core markets versus these two, let's say, emerging or Eastern markets. So it's quite interesting. And then we were able to change the focus onto those areas, which people appreciated, I think.
Yeah. No. So just to summarize that, you have built it on relationships. You have learned. You've done extremely well in adapting, innovating, and changing to customers' needs and demands. And that's what certainly helped you grow and certainly helped you be successful. You must have, and you mentioned it earlier, you must have seen some amazing changes in the automotive industry. And I know you mentioned, passenger car is different to truck. What are the mega trends that you see that are similar or different between the two?
Okay, I guess let's start with similar, since you asked similar first. I think both areas are developing more into a service model. Previously, it was a capital investment, and then there had to be a return on the investment, and then services were kind of were added on to the capital investment to keep the asset in running condition.
Yeah.
And then there was financing and how that all works together. I think financing was maybe the first step, both on both sides. So I think there is some commonality both in the financing and the services side. However, the difference really is that a passenger vehicle is in some ways a convenience type of thing, where it's owned by individuals, also by companies, of course, with their fleets and company cars. But it's for personal transportation. Whereas the moving of goods across the highways, that's really part of the supply chain for industrial production and for the entire economy. And especially in Europe, with the growing dominance of road transport compared to rail and other modes, that that it's critical that this infrastructure is handled in the right way. And because of the different cost components, which we can talk about later, it's also subject to forms of shocks or instability, which really don't affect the car business. So I would say that's really the biggest difference. And the whole reason for purchasing a new truck is to make an investment where you get a return on investments.
Yes.
So, whereas with a car, okay, you could argue for commuting, and then that's kind of a return on investment. But I think the connection between investment and return is maybe not nearly as direct.
Yeah.
With cars.
Absolutely. And I think, what you mentioned there on the car side, because of the utilization, where I think, I don't know, statistically 95% of the time your personal car is sitting around waiting for you, not being utilized, I think that's also potentially one of the main drivers in terms of, the whole car sharing that's coming about, driven by non-traditional automotive companies.
Right, absolutely. And, I appreciate that. And, I think the freight business is also, going in that direction. Just last week on a meeting on Friday with a customer, there was discussion about, the so-called Uberization, of the trucking business. And, there with freight forwarding and things like that, that's clearly, especially in places like the Benelux countries, a very big part of the business, where you have, trailers and containers belonging to certain parties.
Yes.
And then basically the truckers bid on that transport route. So there's that, and and there's thousands. It's almost like perfect competition. On the other hand, you then have the growing importance of truck fleets, which historically have not been nearly as large as they have been in the U.S. And then in the financial crisis, the ones that were there, many of them were wiped out. So that's a little bit of a tricky model because if a fleet gets too big, then it's about capacity utilization, sort of like an airline.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, then if you look at the full service model and the holistic cost of ownership, fleets can have economies of scale.
Yeah.
In terms of financing and maintenance, and even in terms of handling drivers and so forth, because after all, without personnel, it's hard to get a truck to move. Although there could be autonomous ones in the future, we know that. So there's, there are a lot of different things there. I will say that also a very important difference between trucks and cars is also, we've seen, for example, Volkswagen be very successful with passenger cars and having common components and a very synergistic sharing of parts, going way back to the 80s, with Audi and VW and so forth.
Yeah.
So, and then, incorporating Skoda and these other brands. This has been very successful and very profitable for VW. However, the idea of the heavy trucks, being also able to go on a global platform. I mean, our founder, our Mentions founder, Carl Holmquist, spoke 2 years ago about them, that it's really not working. And the reason is that these trucks are built for specific purposes, not just construction versus long haul, but even within the long haul area, fleets have certain different requirements than others.
Yeah.
Some trucks are traveling in mountainous terrain, so they need more horsepower.
True.
There's a whole bunch of things there. And of course, the different OEs are working on the servicing side as well as the financing side. And they can compete very strongly and very effectively, along with banks as well, and leasing companies, and even rental companies.
Yeah.
So there's the battleground is interesting because you can't really say that everything is the same. To an outside observer, it can be, but really the customers they have a specific need, they have specific requirements, and they put all the factors together. So right now, the market supports some kind of diversity, just like the car market.
Yeah.
But and there's also regional brand loyalty, like there is in the car business. So that is more of a similarity. But nevertheless, it's quite interesting. How the different OEs compete with each other. To protect and maybe to expand their market share.
No. And I mean, it's all very relevant what you mentioned. And I think you're in the absolutely fantastic situation because you get to speak to all of the major OEMs. You get to speak of all the leading wholesale distributors across Europe. So these are the really, really big boys of the industry. And I mean, when you put all of what you've said together, what do you see as the mega trends within the truck? I mean, where do you see the market going over the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Well, I think the key thing is, fleet management, whether you've got a fleet of 2 trucks or 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to manage them, they've got to be maintained, and it's all about capacity utilization and uptime.
Yeah.
And today, especially with some of these new preventative maintenance or even maintenance monitoring, real-time monitoring, even, in the case of tires and in some cases brakes, just as examples, theoretically you can really get your truck serviced anywhere on the continent.
Yeah.
And up and running again, and if you tie that together with contracted workshops and things like that, then you can really improve your productivity, which is the key thing. And of course, the drivers like that too, because they don't like to break down in the middle of nowhere and then wait for 2 days. They want to do their job. So and even just monitoring a lot of statistics. So the driver doesn't have to do a lot of paperwork and so forth. So these are all very important. However, I will say let's say holistic fleet management is an emerging business. It started with something called telematics, which you and most of the listeners have heard about, where the different components, like I mentioned a minute ago, gather data.
Yeah.
Okay, and either in real time or in a batch mode once a day, we'll download data about vehicle performance and mileage and so forth to a central place. That's fine. However, the problem has been, of course, what if you have a fleet with trucks from different OEs, a mixed fleet? And by the way, even if they're the same nameplate or brand, they might have different tires and different brakes.
Yeah.
I mean, just because that's the way it is. So of course the demands of the fleets and demands of the OEs and the parts suppliers are not exactly the same. No. So right now, I think the issue is to find holistic solutions, which also depend on standardization. You can't just have a perfect system that works only on one brand of truck. Yeah. It may be perfect for that. The minute you get one truck outside that brand, and of course customers don't want to be locked in. It's like the airplane business. Well, you want to have the option to bring it to the other one. That's an ongoing situation. But from what we understand, like in other areas of technology, and I guess that's sort of my technology background. Before the time of standardization, before the PC basically emerged, and then later, Android and iOS and so forth. You just had, every manufacturer had its own operating system and its own way of computing, and the software from one would never run on the other. So, it would run great, but then over time, you had no choice but to keep buying, the hardware from one supplier. And I think in today's very competitive world, most people don't want that. No. They want to have the flexibility to mix and match and to respond to their own customers' needs. Because we can't forget that the transport companies themselves have customers. The end customer is really their customer, not them. So the more we can help them to be successful, the more we can all do well. And I think the suppliers and so forth understand that. You also mentioned a minute ago distribution, and of course distribution is very good for parts availability out there. And I worked in distribution, not in the automotive business, but in other businesses, and it was very important, especially in the bad old days when we didn't have the European Union with the open borders. I mean, the distributors fulfilled a very important role of just getting the parts through customs in a timely fashion, and handling returns back through customs as well. True. So that was a very important function, and it's not that they don't play an important role now. However, all of the OEs and suppliers that I've talked to, their biggest goal, and because of competition really, is to get close to their customers. So at least to the transport companies, and even to understand, the customers of the transport companies. And that's something that's hard to do. However, getting back to this telematics, and if they can have fleet management systems which have a lot of data and so forth, they can monitor the performance of their own products.
Yeah.
And make them better. So that's what they can do, which is also in interest of their customers. Their customers, of course, want to have more uptime, so they want to have good monitoring and integrating with service providers and suppliers, so that that when the truck is broken here, you can find the nearest parts and get them there and get it into a workshop or whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
With GPS today, the chances of doing that are much higher, but it's still evolving. People have their own agendas, but I think the pressure of the market will force that standardization. Who the winners and losers are, we don't know yet. I think it's kind of exciting. And, I was at a conference in London a couple of weeks ago, investor conference, and, we were talking, on the sidelines of that about, in this whole service provider and telematics field, who are the key players? And of course, it's the OEs and the parts suppliers on the one hand, and their customers, including workshops. But it's also IT-based companies. These are companies coming from a totally different industry. I mean, I worked in that industry. They know relatively little about the automotive business, but they certainly know how to manage data and information and to build applications which can be really valuable. So today, I think the discussion is, okay, who's in charge of sort of the vision and the direction of things. But I think strong IT competence is important. And the question is whether an individual OE or supplier will have the critical mass and the ability to develop such a strong capability purely in-house, or whether they'll need to go to the market. And I think the answer is, at the beginning, it'll be independent companies that are the most innovative.
Yeah.
That also have some capital behind them. And then the winners will maybe be acquired or form an even larger, could merge with each other and get into the service provider business, almost like a service utility. But that's several years out. And I think the road from here to there is very similar to the roads to electrification or to autonomous driving. I mean, we've seen in recent weeks, in the U.S. with some of these regrettable accidents and so forth. But people keep going back, let's say, to the early days of aviation and so forth. That there's no progress without cost.
Yeah.
So I think everybody is working very hard on many continents for that. And, with buses, for example, I mean, the Chinese are leading the way on electrified buses.
Yeah.
Here in Europe, as you know, I mean, there's a lot of problems with nitrogen oxide emissions, especially here in Germany. But we're not there yet with electrified buses.
No.
For a number of reasons. So, fine. But I think the pressure is there. So I think the key thing is islands of innovation, which then, some of them will catch fire. And then the market forces are demanding solutions. So I think that will support them.
Yeah. No, and I mean, what you described is a very changing and fast-changing market.
How prepared are you to navigate the disruptive trends that are set to hit your business? Will you survive and win in the coming years? To understand your level of risk exposure and to help you avoid becoming a statistic of failure, take the free risk assessment here, www.dalcorsogroup.com, which will identify the gaps and how to navigate the risks. By taking the risk assessment, you get a chance to win a free 30-minute strategy session with automotive growth expert Roberto Dal Corso. Roberto can help you identify an amount equivalent to 7% of your total annual sales that you are leaving on the table each year. To survive and win, take action now and visit www.dalcorsogroup.com.
And all of it is definitely going to make, the fleets and the users, it's all advantage for them, if I can put it that way. And some of the difficulties are come through from the OE side and then from the aftermarket side, because a lot of what you described, if you're an OE, you're probably sitting in a prime position or a pole position because you are the OE manufacturer. You can drive the technology, you have the resource and the investment to invest, where maybe if you're an independent distributor, you might feel a little bit threatened by the OEs being aggressive in the marketplace.
Yes, of course, because obviously with full service leasing, I mean, that's all built in, and it's like a closed environment. That has a lot of impact, as you know, on the suppliers, and what kind of business models they have, because if everything's being sold through the OEs are essentially taking over a piece of that distribution. Now, that having been said, I do believe that in parts of the industry there has been over-distribution, in the sense there have been so many distributors that the suppliers, tier one suppliers, let's say, for their aftermarket business, they've been sort of running blind. And having run a distribution business myself across Europe, the last thing you can do is just be, as a supplier, kind of a hostage of what your distributors are telling you, because they'll tell you what they want you to hear. Yeah. I'm not saying they're bad people, but they'll just tell you, their point of view. But if you don't have any other information to correlate that with, maybe you have other distributors, but still, the distributors, they want, good conditions and so forth. So I think it's sort of a delicate thing, and I think the role of the distributors is still there. However, clearly the suppliers want to be in touch, like I said before, with the transport companies, workshops, and end users, or recipients of the transport services, and not just distributors. So I think distributors maybe have a more infrastructure role to play. And furthermore, by the way, even if you've got a full service lease, there are parts of Europe which aren't covered as well by the OE workshops. So I think there always will be a role for them to play. And of course, it's a huge challenge between distributors and workshops have their own sort of central warehouses, of course, to have the right parts available at the right time across a huge geography in lots of countries. So, but in the end, the trucks need to keep running. True. I think there's a role for everyone to play, but clearly the OEs are eating into the distribution business because clearly they see, that it's a profitable segment, and since the margins on the trucks themselves are razor thin, and they have to make money somewhere. It's unavoidable.
Yeah. No, and I just wanted to jump into something a little bit deeper, because you mentioned, customers and getting information only, let's say, one-sided. And I think that's where Momentum has so much to offer, because as a neutral party, where you're speaking to both the manufacturers and distributors and having a global 360 vision and understanding of the market, I think that's where you're in a prime position to be able to bring neutral intelligence, neutral help to people. Could you describe a little bit of how you go to work?
Sure. First of all, our biggest challenge is to sort of, calm people down and get them to think a different way about the market. Because if you're the CEO of any OE or supplier, I mean, you have investors, you have, advisors, economists, and, you hear something about the macroeconomic developments, GDP or something like that, and you panic. A couple of years ago, the German government late in the year revised their GDP forecast downward. I'm sure you probably remember that since you were chuckling. But, and the phone was ringing off the hook with us, but also, all over the country and they wanted to put, cut back on production and so forth, both the OEs and the suppliers, because they saw just, it was terrible, what they thought was going to happen. Well, at Momentum, we simply looked at the data and said, well, okay, there's freight volumes and replacement demand. There's a lot of other factors, including credit and capacity utilization and all the rest. But we basically said, based on the factors that we see, the numbers that we monitor on a monthly or even a weekly basis in many cases, diesel consumption, for example, we said it can't go down like you thought it would. Because we see, you can monitor, you can go back decades if you want to see the relationship between these different indicators and factors.
Yeah.
And one or two can be wrong. It's almost like that expression of the American politicians. You can fool some of the people some of the time, and you can fool all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And I think it was sort of like that, So we felt that these indicators, some of them might be misleading us, sometimes, and a couple of indicators might always be a little bit off, but they're not always going to all be wrong.
Yeah.
And if you look at the fleet as just as a group of vehicles, and you look at how many goods need to be transported, and what goods as well. Now, clearly segments like construction are volatile, and they can go down in a hurry.
Yeah.
So you have to monitor that carefully. But assuming that it's not a construction-based crisis, then you need to look at things like fuel prices and other things, and also understand that a lot of these materials being transported, like food.
Yeah.
They're going to be transported no matter what. The people are still going to eat. GDP is a little bit slower, and industrial production. You really need to understand that, and it can also have some other factors which even temporarily slow it down. A second example of where people maybe overreacted, but we at Roberto were able to quantify things, I think, better, was the transition, from Euro 5 to Euro 6 several years ago with the trucks, because there was pre-buying, because there was like a little window of opportunity where a number of the OEs, in fact, were really promoting their trucks heavily because, hey, you can get a cheaper truck without all this fuel reprocessing system, AdBlue, everything. But you need to buy it now. So there was a record, in December before the switchover, there was a record number of trucks ordered. Okay, because they had ordered, within a certain period of time. But we calculated it, just did the math, and we said, look, after 3.5 months, 4 months, we're going to be back to normal.
Back to normal.
Whereas the manufacturers and suppliers were worried about, a lost year.
Okay.
Or at least 6 to 8 months. So, when things are looking bad, it's very easy to just not see any light at the end of the tunnel and not be able to quantify it, because the market is so volatile. So you don't know how far it's going to go down for how long. And even at Roberto, to be fair and completely transparent, it's very difficult to forecast the exact timing of cyclical changes.
Sure.
But even outside of the cycles, there's some rules which fulfill. So I think with us, it's not like our number is always the right one and everyone else is the wrong one. I mean, the suppliers, they get numbers from the OEs as well as from us. The OEs get numbers from us as well as from their customers.
Yeah.
They see their order books coming in. And in the end, every business person has to make a decision based on, let's say, incomplete information or lack of a crystal ball. Because nobody can predict the future, just like the stock market. So, but I think the key thing for most successful business people is to make informed decisions. You want to know all of the different angles on a problem, and then you have to take a measured risk.
Yeah.
If you don't take any risks, I mean, there's no risk, no return.
No,
we all know that. I was going to say no risk, no fun, but I mean, financially, it's been proven. No risk, no return. It's the more risk, the more return, but more volatility. So, but I think it's very important that people aren't stuck just holding a number. And the other thing that they shouldn't be stuck with is a number, even for momentum, as kind of just coming out of a black box. Like we have some kind of mysterious model. So we try to explain how our model works, and I know there's not time today, but some of the backup material certainly covers that. But it's based on earnings of the carriers and so forth. Well, what causes them to make money? Well, it's freight rates. Well, it's costs, driver costs, it's fuel, it's credit costs, credit availability, all of those things. So, but we also just analyze the market and we talk about, okay, there's risks up or down.
Yeah.
For example, the Russian market, like I said earlier, has been really supporting the heavy truck business, in the past year and continues to. However, and believe me, I do these reports every month for a number of customers. If the oil price goes up, it's going to help the Russian business even more. Yes. However, if the oil price goes down, regardless of anything else, that country will be impacted very, very strongly. Stronger even than countries like Norway and so forth. So, and I experienced this even in the technology business there. It's just that way. They use their foreign earnings to purchase equipment when commodities prices are good for them. So that's a risk, and that's something that people have to understand. Because if they think that the recent growth and strength of the truck market is based on core Europe, and they don't see that the Russian market is playing a good role in the growth component, they won't understand that there's a risk of fuel prices. Because after all, fuel prices go up in Western Europe. That might slow things down a little bit, but then the Russian business will speed up. But then if it goes the other way around and the prices go down, that actually helps the Western countries, because then their costs for fuel go down. And then if the truck companies, the transport companies are making more money, what do they usually do based on all of history? They buy a new truck. So then the Russian market would suffer in this case by an oil price drop, but then there would be large truck demand from a much larger segment of the market. So it's like a little bit of a seesaw. You win a little bit here, you lose a little bit there. But of course, depending on which part of your business you're looking at, if you're an OE looking at your Russian business, you need to know the risks about that business. If you're responsible for Western Europe, then that's another part of the business. And of course, talking about Roberto, we've, especially from our tier one suppliers, we've gotten a lot of requests for understanding production, production. Because it's fine to talk about the overall demand of the market, to make that link with production by brand. Because if I'm shipping my product to this OE, I want to know how much he's going to be producing, and not just how much is going to be used in Europe, but also some of his production, of course, will be exported east or wherever outside of the European theater, but still produced here. So then, how much is he producing here versus exporting? So that's what we've developed, going forward. And of course, on some parts areas, there's the trailer business. This has been really kind of a you're nodding, but it's been a really painful thing for really, I don't want to say all of our customers. The OEs, it's not so bad for them, but for the suppliers, if you think about tires and brakes, just look at a truck. Where are the tires and the brakes? But it's a very difficult business to deal with. So that's why we've been analyzing the sales data for the trailers and coming out with at least a short-term forecast for that. But that's just this year. So we're trying to respond to the customers, and I would say, Robbie, connect our analysis more closely with exactly what the customers need. Otherwise, we find that even business intelligence groups, they either don't have time or the focus to kind of translate overall market demand into the specific area that they're trying to address. So we're trying to come a little closer. At the same time, standardize most of what we do. We do specialized projects, of course, and specialized data. But try to come out with a good common denominator that can help kind of a family of customers together. Because that way, the costs are much lower. We do it once, and it can cover 80 to 90% of their needs. We can fill in the gaps.
No, I think, you guys do a fantastic job. And when you mention, the market changes, Western Europe versus Russia, and how Russia, the influences that can make the market go up and down very, very quickly. And you look at Russia, and Russia's a unique a unique area, because for us, I mean, you know, a number of years ago, we had zero market share in it. It became our biggest market, but at the same time, so volatile by political, geographical, oil, anything can change the market one day to the next. The world changes in Russia. I mean, and then you've got Brexit on the other side. How are you tying all of that together? And I mean, what are you guys saying to your customers? You know, what does the automotive market look like over the next 3 or 5 years? Is it healthy? Should people be moving into the market, or is it something to be a little bit wary of and, you know, think more about where you're investing your money at the moment?
Well, on the one hand, we're not, stock analysts. I mean, Carl Holmquist used to be in that role, but we're independent here, and we don't therefore make specific recommendations, for purchasing stock. Certainly, areas, however, to be serious, like consolidation within industries, whether it's suppliers or OEs, that's certainly an area that needs to be monitored very closely. And some of these recent, again, back in London a few weeks ago, I mean, it was, the greatest chatter was about Chinese investors coming, and Geely, taking major positions in both Daimler and Volvo trucks. In addition to owning all of Volvo cars, of course. So, and what's their strategy? And then some of these various, partial spin-off rumors coming, for other OEs. So there's, I think one of the issues is what is the valuation, for the truck OEs. It's a tricky business. We already talked about a number of those reasons why it's tricky, but then how to value that investment. And I think having, in the case of several of the OEs, having them together with big car, they're sort of like a strap-on, let's say, to the main car business, and it gets kind of buried. So you can't really see what the value is of those. Although, okay, it's more or less visible and so forth, and Packer with DAF trucks. Although then you have the North American versus the European business even there. So I think there's a desire among investors and among producers to develop a better valuation. Okay. This business, which of course then in turn allows for more access to capital. So otherwise, if you're part of a conglomerate, it's a question of internal investment priorities. And as we know in the car business, if you're tethered together with a car company, it's very public that the investment in electrification in cars is a huge investment. So then the question is, okay, how much is going to be left over for truck investment? I'm not saying there won't be enough. I'm just saying it's a question that maybe can be asked.
No, it's a good question, because I mean, inevitably, the volumes are in passenger car, and that's where the majority of the investment goes. And kind of in a lot of aspects, not being negative, but it's almost an afterthought of what happens in the truck. And generally, the truck is anything between 5 and 8 years behind the passenger car industry in terms of technology, in terms of where the market is going and how things are changing and being adapted.
There are issues about components, and there are some components that are common between trucks and and cars. But let's take tires as an example. Okay. Car tires, they're huge runs, okay? On the one hand, the market's less volatile, up and down. But on the other hand, because of these huge runs and economies of scale, you need at least a 3-month lead time. Several tire OEs have confirmed this with us, so that's a big lead time. However, if you're in the truck business, these are bigger, tires, but lower volumes. And I don't want to say it's build to order, but it's possible to throttle the production up and down more effectively in the commercial tire business. Okay. So that is good, because that's the way the business is. Because even doesn't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, and you can have a slow or a fast quarter. And of course, then there's a huge question, not just for tires, but for really anyone. How is that truck being used?
Yeah.
Because if it's mostly long haul, obviously the trucks, the brakes, you use less brakes unless you're going through the Alps a lot.
Sure.
Let's say you're not. But then tires also, then maybe the issue of fuel efficiency is more important than price.
Yeah.
You're willing to pay more. And we all know that the major tire OEs are very advanced, in their engineering, so they can really save you a lot of fuel if you're in long haul. We know how many kilometers the average long haul truck does in a year, right? It's a lot. But then that changes the product mix and so forth, and then there's the whole OE business versus the aftermarket, which we talked about before.
Yeah.
And what's the mix between those, and then where are they getting from? Because the other issue about the distribution, getting back to that, is once the trucks come off lease, they've still got several years of useful life, before they're maybe retired or exported to other regions. And then the independent workshops, I think, may still have a role to play.
Okay.
I think we'll try to keep them on, but once they're out of this lease,
Yeah.
gives them a lot of other advantages. It might not necessarily be enough to keep them there. And of course, a number of products are even interchangeable.
Sure.
And what's the deal with that? Do I want to always have the same parts, or do I just want to? Sometimes these service leases are not as flexible. Whereas, depending on your own business condition, freight rates are not good. You may want to substitute parts.
Yeah.
To keep your head above water. So,
Absolutely.
Flexibility, I think, is not only for Renton, but certainly for service providers like workshops.
Yeah.
And even parts suppliers, is very important. I mean, we've seen a lot of products, where you have sort of a discount line, which is really addressed, I think, more to that tail of the life cycle of the trucks, where you don't want to. It's like an old car. You don't want to put too much into an old car. Because what is the whole thing worth? But you want to keep it on the road.
Yeah.
It's the same with trucks, and also, some of these long haul trucks, which are less reliable and older, they can still be certain configurations can be moved into construction, and waste haulage.
Yes.
So forth, and even if they don't have a traction configuration with the axles, construction waste, as long as it's not very heavy,
It'll work.
They can carry that around.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you mentioned as vehicles get older and, potentially price point products, but again, in pricing, and that also leads to one of the trends that's going on at the moment is because of the digitalization. So price transparency suddenly becomes a whole nother huge issue, because I remember coming to Europe and every country had its own price list, and every country had its own currency. Today with the euro, a lot of that's gone away. And a step further, digitalization, everyone's price lists and almost net prices are are available to everyone. So from the end user to distributors, it makes it a big change in the marketplace. How do you see, the people you talk to dealing with some things like that?
Well, sure, because and the purchasers of such parts, they go to the workshop, they know what the parts are costing. Of course, the workshop wants to, like any good business person, wants to make money, and they know they can only get so much from labor. So where else are you going to make money? It's on parts, and also how much did that part cost you?
Yeah,
and you see it in the retail business, with matching prices and so forth on parts, but only if you bring it up. Even if you're stuck and you have to buy it at a higher price, maybe you won't go back to that workshop the next time. You'll find someone else, and I think that's a healthy thing, because it keeps everybody on their toes. I think for the parts suppliers, it's a big challenge, because then you have to do you have to sort of provide some kind of credits for maybe obsolete inventory, or even take some back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now with open borders, believe me, that's a lot easier than it used to be. And you can move stuff around a lot faster, but still, it's an extra cost and a challenge for those suppliers. But at the same time, and maybe for this reason, because it's so important to be flexible, the margins in the aftermarket business, of course, for the parts suppliers are good.
Yeah. No, that is true.
Subtracting company from the OEs, like we talked about.
Yeah. I mean,
but then, of course, you need to, as a parts supplier, you need to develop the infrastructure where you can stay competitive.
Yeah.
In that aftermarket segment, which is not easy, and the problem is, especially with these high OE numbers recently, you get stockouts of key components, even in the OE channel, much less in the aftermarket channel, and then everybody wants the newest part. Well, it's not there. Well, okay, what are you going to do on a truck or not? And then there's substitution and all the rest. But on the other hand, if the suppliers build too many parts, then they're really sitting on something, and they have to write down that inventory. So, I think that's just the story of everyone's life here.
Yeah.
But it's a very competitive business, and it's not easy. Certainly, information systems are critical, because otherwise, you can do parts analysis. I'm sure in your career you've had plenty of lab reports, from your colleagues, how long this part is going to hold up and so forth. But it's really important how long it holds up in the real world, and that's not the whole story, because it's when will the part be replaced?
Yeah.
And it's not always after the part is broken. It could be part of as part of a kit, or routine maintenance.
Yeah.
We've done studies where these international fleets that are based, let's say, in Eastern Europe. We suspected maybe that they do some maintenance on the road in other countries, but we found through surveys and other work that they tend to do their service at home base. What does that mean? If they're driving from Germany down to Spain, regularly. Yeah. Maybe they'll replace those parts a little earlier than they really have to avoid being stuck out there, with old parts, and also just to have to be driving back to home base and losing income.
Yeah. No, most definitely. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the Polish fleets and what they've been doing, because one of our other speakers mentioned the identical thing of what he's seen, that a lot of the Polish fleets, operating out of Eastern Europe, but running them in Western Europe, and very much so are doing exactly that, or doing all their maintenance at base, or as much of it as possible at base.
Right, and I can say that some of the mechanics here in Berlin, for the cars are from Poland, and they're excellent. I think wherever they are, Polish mechanics are good and they're in demand. But obviously, if they're in Poland and they've got a lot of trucks to maintain, that probably makes it worth it. To bring the trucks back there. But nonetheless, what I'm saying is, once you bring them back there, swap out that entire part set.
Yeah.
Tires have a little bit more left, but then you want to just get it out of the way. Let's just do a nice periodic. It's a question of periodic versus repair.
Yes. Yeah.
Periodic maintenance, preventive versus repair.
Yeah, and it goes back right to what you said at the beginning about fleet maintenance and fleet management versus roadside repair today. I think it's by far becoming far more professional of how it goes to market.
Right, and using some of these fleet management systems, which just now on a project basis are coming out.
Yeah.
Using AI. I mean. I come from the technology.
You got to tell me about your technology background.
We talk about all day about what AI is or isn't. I think it's a nice marketing term. But regardless of AI, big data, whatever you want to call it, it's really a question of, okay, the theory is it's cheaper to bring that truck back to Poland to get it repaired, even though you lose a little bit of operating time.
Yeah.
Okay. But why don't we do some analysis there, both the manufacturers as well as the fleet themselves, and say, okay, well, how often are the older parts really breaking down, or could we run them a little bit longer? Okay, because talking about, I actually, one of my best-selling products in the technology business in Poland had to do with Ethernet.
Okay.
PCs, and in the older buildings over there, for the Ethernet within a building, it didn't have wireless yet.
Yeah.
But it had coaxial cable, sort of like cable TV.
Okay.
Okay, but you also had some of the newer cable in there. But we had competitors that had these coaxial, connectors, for the Ethernet and everything. They were much cheaper, from the Far East and everything else. I'm like, well, why are they buying ours? It's so expensive. It's like overpriced. It's almost like, because in the U.S. nobody wanted to buy them, so okay, fine, we'll sell them abroad. Fine, if you make money, we'll keep producing them. That was it, right? And then finally, I just went down and I talked to somebody who was actually installing these. Oh, why do you guys buy these? It's so expensive, and you get that one. He said, it's simple. They're rated at 50 meters. Okay, because that was the standard for Ethernet over that medium. But everyone knows they work at 200. And the others only work 50, according to spec. But that's not, and nobody knew that.
Yeah.
The people who built these things and designed them didn't know that, and they may have generally known that, but they didn't realize. But that allowed us to dominate the market. So there are a lot of really hidden things that you sometimes don't know.
Yeah.
In a product or a service. One little critical issue which can just make all the difference.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I mean, your example there, makes me think back of, when you're making brakes and axles and especially safety related components, and you go out because you warrant the product for X amount of time because that literally 110% of the times that warranty is going to work. In reality, probably 90% of the times you might get 1.5 times than what you're going out and saying. But the people know that, but you are not prepared to go and put your money behind it. So I think you get yourself caught up in those kind of things, and you don't out there pushing the value added that you've already got.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you have to, from a number of points, whether you're the press, let's say, or a manufacturer, you sort of share the same problem.
Yeah.
You want to be conservative.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
You want to be able to 200% verify what you're reporting for a number of important reasons.
Of course.
But reality may be different, but how do you get to that reality? And of course, fleets is the first step, because then you have a lot of vehicles to compare.
Yeah.
Critical mass of information, which an individual operator does not have. Okay, but on the other hand, you still need some kind of an infrastructure to collect that information.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's on that information that you can then potentially show, because you've got the information, you've got the data, you can verify it and show people that it is something different to what we believe. Because I mean, I've had so many experiences fighting with our OE engineering, because aftermarket product didn't need to be as good as OE product. But yet, as a company, we design it this way and the spec is the same, whether we sell in one or the other, which I can understand, but I also cannot understand. So you've got to wear both hats.
Right, and the thing is the value, the economic value to the customer, because he or she is making a financial investment which needs to have a return.
Yeah.
And you're going to get a return by operating that vehicle, but it's only going to be so high. And if you can increase that return through substitution, it's a question of reliability versus cost.
True.
And how important is the reliability versus other issues? And like I said, it's hard to measure every single vehicle, but a certain number of long-haul vehicles do go into construction or other more locally focused areas, and there, repairs and breakdowns may not be nearly as big an issue. However, you may need more brakes. Because you're carrying big loads and stopping and starting a lot. But then you need different kinds of tires. Maybe you're going over unpaved roads. A lot of factors go into that, and it's very hard, I think, for a let's say a mass supplier to customize that. But they still want to know more than they do through distribution. Distribution is just a very small window.
Small window.
Without dimensions.
Yeah, no, it's very true. No, Douglas, I can only thank you. I know we're running out of time, and I don't want to take up more of your time. Tell us about some of your other passions outside of automotive. I know you mentioned IT. What other passions do you have, and how did IT come about? Because I mean, that's your original background, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, you can say IT is my background in the sense that, back when I was in school and after school, I did some work for my father who was in the, he did some IT work for clinical laboratories, blood testing equipment.
Okay.
Which is a little bit like telematics, I guess. But then actually, when I was in university, I studied economics and econometrics.
Yeah.
I got into into the analysis of the data. So that's what really connects with Roberto, who's in the construction business, working with large companies there.
Yeah.
But then actually, a former colleague from there was in the IT business in Switzerland, and he asked me to come over. So that's kind of how I got into Europe, and then I moved around there. But it's sort of related to one of my personal interests, I guess, which is foreign languages and so forth. Being originally from the U.S., that's maybe unusual.
Yeah.
At least one of my customers reacted with surprise last week, because.
So, how many languages do you speak then?
Well, in addition to American English, my German is currently my best foreign language. French used to be.
Yeah.
It's still okay, but it sometimes gets rusty. Not too many people in Germany speak French. I've got some. I've studied Mandarin Chinese.
Oh wow.
2010, and I would say I'm at a pretty good level. I can understand them all, and I'm maybe not as elegant speaking, but for people who don't speak any English, it's great when I'm over in China, because you can really, whether you're speaking with owners of companies,
yes,
or politicians, they tend not to speak English, but they really like to obviously get an impact or an insight from foreigners, how things are going on in the world, maybe in their export markets. But of course it's good because then I can also kind of understand how they think and how they develop their business. So, these things aren't easy. I know it's not easy to learn languages, but it's fun for me, and I understand it's sort of a systematic approach. And it's almost like people who say they want to climb Mount Everest. I mean, people ask why you learn this language, and I say because it's there.
Exactly.
But it's so much fun, to do that, and you can always get better. And I'm hoping to take a shot at. I mean, I've been saying Swedish for several years, but certainly Italian. I've got a base there, but I'm trying to get beyond the ordering in the restaurant level. My car did have some problems down in Italy a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a difficult situation, and non-English speaking mechanic. So that helped a lot. I think necessity is the mother of invention, whether it's in the automotive business or in the language business.
No, it's true. And I think with, the language side, I think also it just takes you as a person to be willing to take a little bit of a risk and try, as bad as it may sound, and come out, but it just helps to build and break, the bridge, and it gets you closer to people.
It really does. Although I will say with Chinese, the problem is you learn so many languages, and you think, I've learned so many, and then what's another one? It's just another stop on the road. But there, the pronunciation, at least for me, and I think for most Westerners, is very hard because it's a tone-based language, and to have people speaking with each other in front of my face, where usually embarrassing people is avoided. Just saying he has a terrible accent, I can't understand the word he says. That made me so angry that I had to go back and really work hard on my accent, because I just was so angry.
Okay.
So accomplished something very good for me, although at the time it was extremely upsetting. Because it was after months and months of hard work. I
take my hat off to you. I've never tried Chinese. I I don't know anything even similar to it. I'm very Latin-based, I'm Germanic-based, but no Chinese, I'm afraid, for me, not yet. But at least you are preparing for the future of what might eventually come. I think Chinese is becoming, a more important business language as we move forward.
Absolutely, and it is the most commonly spoken mother tongue in the world, and I think it's quite good because the Chinese make a huge effort. I think you would agree to train everyone in school in English.
Yeah.
And a number of Chinese really get to a very high level in English. And to me, it's just a question of being nice to make an effort to learn their language. And but the key thing is to find topics that are fun.
Yes, yeah.
Like sports or something like that. Then I think then you can really make a lot faster progress than if you're going from the textbooks. So that's just a small tip maybe for any language.
Well, for us, we've got automotive, so that keeps it more interesting.
For example, yes, absolutely. And believe me, I've developed a very wide range of knowledge on brakes and tires and other things like that in Chinese. Which is also good. Because otherwise that's something that maybe the average student would not know.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I know nothing. No, but Douglas, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been absolute pleasure talking to you. I've learned so much, but then that's always the case whenever we have one of these discussions. I'm always learning from you, so I can only say thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing with us all.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Robbie, for the invitation, and for everyone else for listening. It's really great, and I just hope that if anyone has any questions, they have the contact information. They'll be able to access it there, and just let me know. And we also have a newsletter that we send out every 3 to 4 months, and in English and German. So you can choose which language, and then. If you like, you can also just send an email, and we can put you on the list.
And for everyone thinking about that, highly advisable. Get the newsletter, valuable information that does come out. I've been getting it, and it's brilliant stuff.
Okay.
Douglas, thank you so much. You have a super rest of the day.
Okay, you too, Robbie. Thanks very much.
I hope that you have enjoyed and found value in watching this interview. If you want to learn more about the leading disruptive automotive trends impacting the industry, check out www.dalcorsogroup.com. I encourage you to share it with colleagues that will appreciate great industry insights. Join us tomorrow for more experts from around the world.